The new Index Space Marines has a whole load of good stuff in it, but along with all the changes there is a little bit of weirdness. Let's talk about two changes that just make me ask why. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Space Marines once more, and I just wanted to talk briefly about two changes to the datasheets there. They really do seem to have ruined the unit for the battlefield role that they had at the moment at least. Index Space Marines has certainly been a whole load of content to process, a massive 123 datasheets I believe, never mind all the stuff for the divergent chapters. For the most part I really do quite like the rules for the vast majority of the units. Quite a lot of them seem fun, and I feel like perhaps for Space Marines more than most, the addition of those unique special rules actually helps differentiate them a little bit. I think when things are literally just based on their raw stats and combat ability alone, Space Marines kind of struggle for that. They've just got so many units that overlap slightly in various different battlefield roles. Today though, I wanted to talk about two bits that I must admit I really didn't like out of the changes, and that's the changes to the 10-man Locked Tactical Squad and the consolidated Wargear for Vanguard Veterans. First up, we've got the Tactical Marines, and out of all the changes that Games Workshop might have done to them, I really wasn't expecting them to basically just lock them to a 10-man squad size, so you can't fill them in 5-man squads anymore, which you have been able to do in some form I think, at least since I started playing Warhammer 40k many editions ago. It means that now if you want your standard firstborn battle line, you need to commit to really quite meaty squads of them, 10 models in total. And also at the same time it comes with the removal of the combat squad mechanic, so that's kind of bad timing that doesn't mitigate it. That's the ability that Space Marines have had for a long time to break down their max size squads into two smaller ones, perhaps partly from when the force organisation chart was really quite small. This could allow them to get more squads on the board, as Space Marines are historically kind of elite. I think at least for 5 editions now, you'd be able to field Space Marine squads with just 5 models, maybe 1 special or 1 heavy in that unit depending on the era, or take them up to a maximum of 10 models and then usually field them with 1 special and 1 heavy. It does seem that they've changed the rules slightly on that allocation. Looks like your 10-man tactical squads can now take 2 special weapons as well, which I guess is useful if you want to go forward a bit more aggressively and you don't want to be taking heavy weapon penalties, or I guess paying for overly pricey guns should they still cost a decent amount of points. The other rules change that I suppose has gone hand in hand is their datasheet special rule. This one is fall back, shoot and charge for the Tactical Marines, so kind of like getting Tactical Doctrine all the time. I guess makes sense given their name. It will mean that their shooting is a little bit safer to being tagged by the enemy, though the charging is maybe a tiny bit more underwhelming as they don't tend to be amazing in combat for their points cost. It's kind of interesting and part of a trend that seems to have happened to a few other squads in 40k. Fire Warriors and Pathfinders from the Tau Empire are perhaps a good example as well. I think a lot of people were expecting the Cadian Catachin to be expected in units of 5, like the Tempestor Scions can be, but they're locked 10 as well. And also the Demon Troops are 10 models only, but they went the other way, dropping down from a bigger squad size of up to 30 in 8th edition. In general, being lumbered with an automatic 10 size squad really isn't great news for their competitiveness in 40k. If you look at just about any competitive list that was taking troops in 8th and 9th edition, for every single squad that has a choice, it often tended to be fielded in 5s. It just generally tends to work out more efficient for cheaper objective takers like that, as generally you don't want to overcommit to just bodies standing on points. And even if you did want multiple units, it usually makes sense to have them running around as multiple units. You have the option for more sergeants with weapon upgrades, and it also means it's harder for the opponent to wipe them all out due to loss of overkill, or maybe being able to hide one unit but not the other. Generally, if you're building out to bigger squads, it's either because you have to, like the Black Templar Crusader squad, and that's got a lot of its own selling points, or because you want the units to be a powerful damage dealer of some sort. Maybe things like Vanguard Veterans that we'll get onto, or something else to use some big stratagems, or I guess leaders in 10th edition. Tactical squads can get a decent choice of leaders, but they just really don't strike me as a unit that you're really going to want to be a focused part of the battle line. Their damage output is never particularly exciting just with those AP0 bolt guns, even if you can throw in a heavy weapon or two. I think their slightly awkward mix of gear maybe doesn't help them either. A lot of their guys are just blazing away with small arms, which is fine against light infantry, less so against anything else. So it does mean that the squad just isn't really general purpose, despite being named a tactical squad. Its overall damage output just isn't going to be particularly strong against anything that's tougher than light infantry units. It will just be chipping in, say, a lascannon shot or something against heavies, which isn't nothing, but it's not the same as a more dedicated unit for that role. I just feel that if these guys are being lumped into one great big 10-man squad, they'd have to be really quite cheap compared with the rest to get a look in. And maybe Games Workshop is going down that way with the points costs. I guess we'll find out in a few days' time there. I think maybe it does just look a little bit targeted to firstborn troops, seeing as all the rest of the squads that are sold in 10-man boxes didn't get made automatically 10. They also sell assault intercessors, regular intercessors and hellblasters that way. and they don't seem to have chosen to make any of those into 10-man units. They're still happily able to split into more efficient 5s. I'm genuinely not sure if they're trying to softly discourage tactical squads, perhaps in a similar sort of way as they wanted to make scouts a bit more peripheral when they took them out of the troops role back in 8th edition. Or maybe they are just trying to make them a little bit more distinct from their Primaris counterparts. They'll definitely operate as a very different unit now, though it might not be for the better. I feel like, to be honest, they already had a pretty distinct battlefield role. They're basically Space Marine bodies if you want the fancy heavy guns or sergeant upgrades within the unit, which the Primaris generally are locked out of. As well as that, perhaps the less obvious casualty of this is the Space Marine Razorback. Kind of weird that that didn't get some sort of rule similar to the new Drukhari Venom or the Leagues of Votan Sagittor for splitting these squads down. They seem to have thought of that with other small transports, but I guess the Razorback's just going to be locked to transporting more elite units now. I guess Devastators, Vanguard Vets or Assault Marines. I believe it can't transport Stern Guard, as they're now Primaris with the Tacticus keyword. Let me know what you make of the change anyway. Could you get round to 10-man tactical squads, and do you think that you still get away with fielding them in a somewhat strong Space Marine army, when we know the points versus the intercessors? The other change that I was perhaps least a fan of in the new Codex Space Marine update was the change to Vanguard Veteran melee weapons. I must admit, the first time I saw the new datasheets when I was making the Space Marine review, I did groan a bit. Currently, Vanguard Veterans really are quite an interesting Space Marine melee unit, one of the few units that moves fast and hits really hard. I feel like they work quite well and had a different sort of role to the Assault Marines in 9th edition. These guys were the ones that you wanted to build damage combos around and actually take the fight to the enemy with some big stacked damage with Thunderhammers perhaps, or some sort of build involving Lightning Claws, Chainswords or Storm Shields. Assault squads were more kept cheap and the lighter version that deals less damage, mainly just due to all the options they had in the kit. The Assault squad has got a Power Fist and Eviscerator, but the Vanguard Veteran kit is actually really quite full of exciting melee weapons. There are enough parts, I think, to give the entire squad Thunderhammers maybe, and the Sergeant a Relic Blade. If Games Workshop stuck to their previous conventions with these sort of weapons, you'd still be having a squad that could hit enormously hard. Seems that's changing in 10th edition though, as unfortunately the Vanguard Veterans have been lumbered with something called heirloom weapons. The profile for these is about as disappointing as it possibly could be, I think. Strength 5, AP -1 and damage 1 on every profile across the unit, whether it's armed with a Power Fist, Thunderhammer, Relic Blade, standard power weapon, or just a chainsword. I was expecting some sort of consolidation of the Vanguard Veteran datasheet, probably to have things like Lightning Claws, Power Axes, and Power Swords rolled into the generic Strength 5 AP2 power weapon profile. And then if the precedent of units like Captains and Terminators was anything to go by, have Power Fists and Hammers be a distinct option. You'd pay more points for them, but that would be high investment in an elite damage dealer unit. Now though, basically even if they have Thunderhammers and Power Fists throughout the whole unit, which I'm sure a whole load of people do have them modelled with, they're still basically just going to be an anti-infantry unit now. Strength 5, AP -1 and damage 1. It's just not going to go far against hard targets, things that you might have wanted to hit with Thunderhammers before. They do get a slight damage buff on the charge, getting lethal hits. I suppose that will help them punch up a little bit against tougher stuff. They're still going to struggle to scratch anything with that AP -1 and damage 1 though. And it's not like lethal hits are particularly rare throughout 10th edition 40k. I think it's also kind of weird that basically the Assault Squad is now the one that can access damage 2 weapons that hit a bit harder. The Sergeant can take a Power Fist or Thunderhammer, and then one model can be given an Eviscerator. So compared with the Vanguard Veterans, you can have an extra 6 or so mid-strength, mid-AP, and damage 2 attacks, so you could actually be a lot more of a threat to 2-wound infantry and light vehicles. The other models are basically the same as the Vanguard Veterans. Their attacks only drop down from Strength 5 to Strength 4. It'll be relevant against some infantry, but perhaps less so than it was before the toughness table got stretched. The Assault Squad also has mortal wound impact hits as well, which I think often will do more damage than the lethal hits. That Hammer of Wrath is fairly punchy. Just seems utterly bizarre that the standard Assault Marines are pretty much a more dangerous assault unit now than these very fancy Vanguard Veterans that have access to all the most powerful power weapons in the chapter. Seems like if you want proper elite jump pack shock troops, the Blood Angels are the way to go with that now. They still have access to their Sanguinary Guard and Death Company datasheets, both of which can load up with as many damage 2 weapons as they'd like. I feel like the Death Company datasheet just shows they could have kept Vanguard Veterans somewhat similar if they'd wanted to, at the very least giving them the option for some fists and hammers to differentiate them a bit. In any case, let me know your thoughts. What do you make of the changes to the Tactical Marines and the Vanguard Veterans? I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on the units and why Games Workshop might have chosen to make these changes specifically. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly be keeping the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked down in the video description below if you'd like to help support. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.